Explore the ancient world of heroes and gods with the epic adventure of Gilgamesh. In Myth Comics, we present the story of the legendary Sumerian king whose quest for immortality takes him to the ends of the known world and beyond. His legend is captured in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the great Sumerian and Babylonian poetic work that predates the writings of Homer by 1,500 years, making it the oldest epic in world literature. Discover the secrets and wonders of an era where the impossible becomes reality. Are you ready for the journey? In the ancient city of Uruk, one of the most powerful and shining cities of the ancient world, reigned the Sumerian king Gilgamesh, a being of enormous proportions and extraordinary strength. Well, although his figure was half human, the other half was divine. Being the son of the goddess Ninsuna and King Blugulbanda, Gilgamesh built grandiose temples in the form of ziggurats, surrounded his city with high walls, and planted many orchards of exotic fruits. With his superb and imposing stature that surpassed any man, Gilgamesh ruled with an iron fist and unlimited whim over the frightened inhabitants of Uruk. No one dared to refute his designs, for in addition to his semi-divine condition, his corpulent musculature instilled great fear. Among the most reprehensible acts attributed to Gilgamesh was the practice known as ius prima noctis, which gave him the right to share a bed with the young virgins of Uruk on the eve of their weddings. This custom, imposed by his despotic will, was a grievance that consumed the souls of the citizens. The men of Uruk, filled with anger but powerless before the divine authority of their king, were forced to submit to this humiliating tradition. It was a yoke that weighed on the city, a shadow that darkened the greatness of Uruk under the reign of Gilgamesh. Fed up with Gilgamesh's excesses, the citizens prayed to the great goddess Ninhursag, mistress of creation, imploring a remedy to put an end to the cruelty of the despot king. Moved, Ninhursag decided to send help by molding a clay figure in the shape of a man, but with bestial features. To this primitive and savage being, covered with hair and endowed with supernatural strength, the goddess gave the name Enkidu. She cast him to the earth with the mission to confront and defeat the oppressor Gilgamesh. Enkidu, you shall be the scourge of the tyrant Gilgamesh and the restorer of peace in oppressed Uruk. May your forces duel, and out of their clash emerge the justice for which the city longs. Enkidu, with his robust and savage appearance, wore a head of hair as thick as the forest undergrowth and bull horns that rose majestically on his forehead. His life was in harmony with nature. He shared the green pasture with the agile gazelles and quenched his thirst in the crystalline rivers, shoulder to shoulder with the sovereign lions. The fauna of vast and fertile Sumer recognized him as one of their own and paid him obeisance as the guardian of their wild world. Enkidu, more than a protector, was the embodied spirit of wildlife, a bridge between the animal world and the realm of men. His presence imposed a sacred balance, fervently defending the integrity of his habitat against any threat. Everything seemed to be going wonderfully, but when Enkidu first observed everything around him, he was so surprised that he completely forgot his main objective, which was to end the oppression of the tyrant Gilgamesh. Thus, the goddess saw with concern that Enkidu had forgotten his task, absorbed in the freedom of his primitive existence in the forest. Although she tried in many ways to remind him of his purpose, her attempts were to no avail. In the green meadows bordering the forest, a humble hunter was leading his flock to a nearby water source. Thirst was overwhelming the sheep and goats, and he knew this was the perfect time to quench their need. Little did he know that when he arrived at the watering hole, he would encounter something he had never seen before. It was not an animal, but neither was it an ordinary man. It was like a mixture of both, a brute force of nature embodied in a humanoid form. Fear gripped him, but his survival instinct kept him alert. He watched silently as the creature drank greedily, its clumsy, ungainly movements revealing a lack of contact with civilization. When the creature finally moved away, the hunter regained his composure. His mind flitted with questions. Who was it? Where had it come from? What was it doing in the forest? He knew he must report this unusual encounter to the authorities. Filled with doubt and fear, the poor hunter set out on his way back to his village. Arriving home, he immediately sought out his father and recounted in detail everything he had witnessed, emphasizing the size, strength, and wild appearance of the creature. The father listened attentively to the story. His face darkened as he understood the gravity of the situation. "A being as powerful as you describe?" he asked. "There is only one who possesses such strength and vigor, Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. He is the chosen of the gods, sent to protect and rule our land. This creature may be a test of his power, or perhaps a threat." The hunter, still shaken by the experience, could not imagine that the forest creature was related to the mighty king. However, his father's words convinced him that he must act quickly. The next day, as soon as the sun flashed its first rays, the hunter set out for Uruk's palace. With his heart in his throat, he requested an audience with King Gilgamesh. He had to tell him about the unexpected encounter in the forest and let the king decide the course of action. The arrival of this horrified man at the palace caused quite a stir. The news of a wild being roaming the vicinity of Uruk spread rapidly, generating unrest among the populace. Gilgamesh, ever attentive to the affairs of his kingdom, received the hunter with solemnity. The hunter narrated his story in detail, accurately describing the creature's appearance and behavior. Gilgamesh listened attentively, his analytical mind processing every word. At the end of the tale, a smile breaks out on the king's face. The astute Gilgamesh, after listening to the hunter's tale, understood that Enkidu was no mere wild beast, but a being with extraordinary potential. Determined to make him an ally and companion, he devised a bold plan. In the city of Uruk, there was a sacred place dedicated to Inanna, the goddess of love and war. There, priestesses known as Naditu not only worshipped the goddess, but also offered their sexual favors to men of high rank as a form of divine offering. Gilgamesh selected one of these priestesses, Shamhat, for she possessed the Kuzbo, the divine gift of attraction and teaching, also known for her beauty and cunning. He entrusted her with the mission of seducing Enkidu and civilizing him through love and sensuality. Shamhat, with her irresistible charm and her knowledge of the amatory arts, went into the forest in search of Enkidu. She found him surrounded by wild animals, behaving like one of them. With subtlety and patience, Shamhat attracted Enkidu's attention. She invited him to a banquet in the temple of Inanna, where she offered him delicious food, intoxicating wine, and seductive music. Enkidu, captivated by Shamhat's beauty and charm, accepted her invitation. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh was visited by Ninhursag in dreams. The goddess revealed to him Enkidu's transformation and announced the arrival of a great friend. Gilgamesh, eager to meet this new companion, waited impatiently for the day when they would meet. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat and Enkidu indulged in the pleasures of love. Shamhat not only gave him physical pleasure, but also taught him the rules of civilized society, language, the use of tools, and living with other human beings. Enkidu, under Shamhat's guidance, underwent an extreme transformation. His savage nature became more refined, his mind opened to new knowledge, and his heart was filled with emotions previously unknown to him. By the end of the 7th night, Enkidu was no longer the wild creature that had come to the forest. He had become a civilized man, ready to face the challenges that awaited him alongside Gilgamesh. Shamhat's mission had been a success. Thanks to her cunning and compassion, Enkidu had discovered his potential as a human being and was ready to assume his place in the world. "Now that you have tasted the bread of life, you can no longer stay on the step," Shamhat told him. And Enkidu, looking at his new civilized self, knew that he must go to Uruk to fulfill the destiny that had been entrusted to him by the great Ninhursag, to confront the superb Gilgamesh. In the bustling streets of Uruk, a great wedding was being prepared. The city vibrated with the joy of the celebration, but a shadow of uneasiness darkened the happiness of the bride and groom. The moment was approaching when Gilgamesh would exercise his right of prima nota, an ancient custom that allowed him to sleep with the bride before marriage. Amid the revelry, Enkidu, the former wild man, appeared, guided by the wise priestess Shamat. Enkidu, now civilized and with a strong sense of justice, could not tolerate such abuse. He stood in Gilgamesh's way and firmly challenged him. A heated debate flared up between the two titans. Enkidu defended love and the bride and groom's right to their happiness, while Gilgamesh, clinging to his tradition and power, refused to budge. The crowd, witnessing the confrontation, moved away in fear, leaving the two giants facing each other. Gilgamesh, enraged by Enkidu's insolence, was the first to attack. A torrent of blows was unleashed between the two, shaking the foundations of the city. The fight was epic, worthy of gods and demigods. For 7 days and 7 nights, the two titans exchanged blows, destroying houses and spreading terror among the inhabitants of Uruk. Each punch thrown between them was strong enough to kill a warrior. However, neither Gilgamesh nor Enkidu gave in. Despite the brutality of the combat, a strange admiration began to emerge between them. They recognized each other's strength and courage, qualities they possessed in abundance. Finally, in one last mighty blow, Gilgamesh brought Enkidu down. However, instead of taking advantage of the victory to eliminate him, Gilgamesh extended his hand to Enkidu, offering to help him up. Enkidu, surprised by this unexpected gesture, accepted the king's hand. At that moment, something magical happened. The anger and rancor dissipated, giving way to great mutual respect and admiration. Both felt proud of the battle they had fought, a battle that had proven their strength and courage. With a brotherly embrace, Gilgamesh and Enkidu sealed their friendship. From that day on, Gilgamesh abandoned his former arrogance and became a just and compassionate king, guided by the wisdom and loyalty of his new friend. Gradually, their friendship grew stronger until Enkidu was considered not just a friend, but a member of his family. During the following years, Gilgamesh and Enkidu traveled through many unknown lands where they had many adventures together, defeating monsters and heroes of all kinds. However, one thought always haunted Gilgamesh's mind, as he was already realizing that both he and Enkidu were growing old and would someday have to face death. Gilgamesh, obsessed with the idea of eternalizing his and Enkidu's names, convinced his companion to embark on a journey to the cedar forest, home of the fearsome demon Humbaba, created by the god Enlil to protect his sacred trees and strike terror into the hearts of men. Despite his reputation, Humbaba had never left his forest or caused any damage that would justify an attack. However, Gilgamesh was determined to confront him, and Humbaba, in defense of his home, prepared to repel the intruders. Soon, the news of the journey to the cedar forest reached the ears of the inhabitants, who suggested to the stubborn king that he desist from his journey. They could do nothing but implore and pray to the gods to give the two inseparable friends strength and courage to return successfully from their mission. Preparations for the journey were arduous. Weapons as imposing as the king's wrath were forged, and enough provisions were gathered to survive the journey ahead. The day of departure arrived, and Gilgamesh, his heart brimming with courage and his mind clouded with pride, bade farewell to his beloved city. The journey to the cedar forest was long and strenuous. They crossed steep mountains, rushing rivers, and endless plains. During the nights, the silence was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the howling of wolves, and nightmares haunted Gilgamesh's sleep. Enkidu, always at his side, watched with concern the growing fear that gripped his friend. These groans filled Enkidu with dread, but when dawn came, Gilgamesh himself was the one who again filled his faithful friend with courage. At last, after days of travel, they arrived at the gates of the cedar forest. The imposing shadow of the giant cedar trees stretched over the land, where darkness and mystery pervaded the place. A shiver ran down Enkidu's spine, but Gilgamesh, blinded by his daring, paid no heed to the warning signs. They moved deeper into the forest, their footsteps growing heavier and their hearts pounding. Suddenly, a deafening roar broke the stillness. A colossal being, with fur as black as night and eyes that glowed like embers, appeared from among the trees. It was Humbaba, the guardian of the forest, and his fury was notorious. Gilgamesh, who at first had not felt terror, was perplexed when he looked at the guardian of the forest, his skin crawling with fear. But there was his faithful friend who shook him hard to bring him back to his senses and give him courage. These were precious and notable moments of mutual support. Thus, together, like two titans, they faced the monster in a unique battle. The fight was titanic and bloody. Swords against claws, strength against fury. The forest trembled with every blow, and trees fell as if they were mere twigs. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, fighting side by side, showed unparalleled bravery. The battle was quite close. Sometimes it seemed that Humbaba had all the skills to win because of his enormous strength. But always in every story, there is a divine intervention, and this is no exception. The god Shamash, observing the battle from above, decides to help Gilgamesh. That is why he decided to send 13 powerful winds with a single finger. Taking advantage of the divine help, Gilgamesh and Enkidu managed to subdue the formidable Humbaba. As the giant lay defeated, he pleaded for his life. "O brave warriors, I implore you, let me live. My death will bring you neither honor nor glory, only the eternal curse of the forests." To which Enkidu, blinded by victory, said, "Gilgamesh, we must not yield. His end is necessary to free these lands from his shadow. Your plea falls on deaf ears, Humbaba. Your reign of terror ends today." With those words, Gilgamesh put an end to the giant's existence. Despite the curse uttered by Humbaba with his dying breath, the heroes embraced, celebrating their triumph. The victory was sweet, and though tears mingled with laughter, they knew they had rid the cedar forest of its evil. Convinced of their divine power, Gilgamesh and Enkidu vowed that no being on earth could ever defeat them. Despite their feat in defeating Humbaba, the fury of the gods would soon follow. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh and Enkidu planned to feast on their victory. But during the feast, an unexpected guest was present. She was Ishtar, also known as Inanna, the goddess of love, beauty, war, and fertility, who, from her heavenly chambers, could not help but be captivated by the gallantry and bravery of Gilgamesh. Determined to have him as her husband, the beautiful deity descended to the gates of Uruk. Upon catching sight of Gilgamesh, Ishtar felt a burning passion seize her being. With a seductive smile, she approached the hero and bluntly proposed, "Gilgamesh, son of kings, let me be your wife. United, we shall rule over all the kingdoms of earth and heaven." Gilgamesh, though flattered by the exquisite beauty of the goddess, watched her warily. He was well aware of Ishtar's fickle nature and her innumerable past love affairs. Undeterred, he replied, "Beautiful Ishtar, your proposal honors me, but I must decline. I cannot be one more husband in your endless list of lovers. I prefer to continue my journey alone." The demigod king's words were like a violent slap in the face to the vain deity. How dare a mere mortal refuse her charms? Anger and humiliation seized Ishtar, clouding her judgment. Without further ado, the goddess took flight to the ethereal abodes of her father Anu, the king of the gods. With tears of fury, she stood before him pleading for vengeance. "Father, the insolent Gilgamesh has dared to disown me and stain my honor. I implore you to grant me the fearsome celestial bull to punish him for his affront." Anu, though reluctant to bring about such destruction in the land of men, could not refuse in the face of his daughter's threat to open the gates of the underworld and unleash absolute chaos. Agreeing out of fear that his daughter would carry out her threat, the supreme god brought down the celestial bull, a formidable beast with huge sharp horns and fur as bright as the stars. But before all this, the god asked his resentful daughter, "My daughter, I will grant your request, but you must understand the consequences. If I intervene, the land will suffer 7 years of scarcity and drought. Have you provided enough sustenance for your people and the creatures during this time of hardship?" Ishtar, with folded arms and frowning, replied, "Father, I have foreseen this eventuality. I have stockpiled grain in abundance for the inhabitants and sufficient fodder for the beasts. I will ensure that, even in years of barrenness, there will be no lack of food." Then the arrival of the bull shook the foundations of Uruk. With a roar that echoed in every corner, it began to ravage everything in its path, spreading terror among the citizens. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, far from being daunted, urged each other to confront the threat. "By the gods, Enkidu, the arrogant Ishtar has sent us this new test. Let us show her that no beast, no matter how divine, can defeat us." And so it was that both heroes rushed to meet the bull in the streets of the city. What Uruk witnessed that day was an epic battle never seen before. The celestial bull spewed flames from its jaws while its sharp horns cut the air like spears. Gilgamesh and Enkidu dodged and counterattacked with the skill of the great warriors they were. It should be noted that the heroes fought with the same weapons with which they had defeated the fearsome Humbaba. In an early stage, the strong Enkidu managed to hold the huge animal by the horns, while Gilgamesh lashed out at its belly with his spear. The fight was bloody and endless, but the tenacity and courage of the companions prevailed. With one last superhuman effort, Gilgamesh finally managed to plunge his weapon into the celestial bull's entrails, taking its life. Exhausted but triumphant, Enkidu and Gilgamesh contemplated the imposing beast's defeat. Then, in gratitude to the god Shamash, the heroes tore out the heart of the terrible beast. So young and old were grateful to their ruler and his great friend for having saved their beloved Uruk from that colossal beast. Their bond had grown even stronger after this unparalleled display of courage. What they did not suspect, however, was that their defiance of the gods would have terrible consequences. That same day, a great feast was held in honor of the saviors of Uruk. However, the heroes did not count on the goddess Ishtar being furious, first for having been rejected, and also for having failed in her plan and consequently lost her most beautiful creation. For this reason, the goddess descended to see the festivity up close, placing herself behind the walls of Uruk. While celebrating the victory to the sound of music and the flattery of the people, Enkidu managed to visualize the goddess, and blinded by the euphoria of the celebration, as a sign of mockery, cut off the legs of the celestial bull and threw them at the feet of Ishtar, saying, "Let this teach you not to challenge the power of men. We have defeated your divine spawn." The outrage was too much for the vain goddess of love. With a withering glare, Ishtar swore that the heroes would pay dearly for their audacity. In a burst of blinding light, she disappeared from Uruk, cursing Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But that affront not only annoyed the goddess Ishtar, but also the other gods who decided that someone should die. Which one of them should it be? The party lasted until nightfall. After having their well-deserved feast, the friends were already in their rooms ready to receive a new day. But that same night, Enkidu lay in a deep sleep. His breathing was slow and regular, but his face was grimacing with anguish. Suddenly, a shiver ran through his body, and his eyes snapped open, awake and full of terror. He had had a vivid dream, a premonition so real that it had left him feeling as if he had experienced death firsthand. At the first ray of sunlight, Enkidu sought out Gilgamesh with an unhinged countenance. Taking him by the arm, he pulled him aside to relate his dream. "My friend, listen to what the gods have revealed to me. In the darkness of the night, I saw them gathered in conclave. Anu, Enlil, Ea, and Shamash himself were deliberating on our actions. It was then that the great Anu sentenced, 'For having slain the celestial bull and the guardian Humbaba, you deserve the supreme punishment.'" Enkidu paused, swallowing saliva with difficulty before continuing. But Enlil, the implacable judge, decreed, "Enkidu must perish for his daring. Instead, Gilgamesh shall live." A tomb-like silence hung over both companions. Gilgamesh felt an icy chill shiver through him as he realized the terrible implications of the dream. The shadow of death had been cast over the head of his stalwart friend. How could they defy the judgment of the gods? Was there a way to evade the fateful destiny that awaited Enkidu? Enkidu, despite the disturbing dream that had tormented him, was striving to get on with his life in the palace of Uruk, at the side of his faithful friend Gilgamesh. However, a persistent malaise began to deteriorate his health. With each passing day, Enkidu felt weaker, and sadness took hold of him. That is when, in his dying moments, Enkidu regretted having come to civilization. Gilgamesh, seeing his friend's deterioration, spared no effort to find a cure by seeking out the best healers and potions. He visited the temple of Shamash regularly, imploring for Enkidu's health. But the king's pleas were in vain. Enkidu's illness progressed fatally, robbing him of more and more vitality. One day, as the faint light of dawn crept through the window, Enkidu breathed his last. His heart had stopped beating. Gilgamesh, watching him with a broken heart, felt the life drain from his friend's body. In a desperate act, Gilgamesh rushed over to Enkidu's limp body, hugging him tightly and sobbing inconsolably. He remembered with nostalgia each of their adventures together, the battles fought, the laughter shared, the dreams they had fulfilled. "I can't let this happen," cried Gilgamesh, his voice choked with grief. "I can't die like Enkidu. I don't want to die ever." At that precise moment, a flame of courage flared within Gilgamesh. A new purpose was born in his heart, to find immortality, the only way to escape the fate that had snatched his beloved friend. But before embarking on his quest, Gilgamesh remembered that only 2 people on Earth had achieved the immortality granted by the gods. He decided to go in search of them to ask for their help and find out how to receive this blessing. Utnapishtim and his wife were the only immortal human beings after surviving the great flood that almost wiped out mankind. Knowing this story, Gilgamesh set out on a journey to their residence. The king of Uruk prepared for a long journey in search of Utnapishtim and eternal life. The days passed and the journey seemed to drag on without end until he reached the 2 mountains from where the sun rises. At the entrance, he saw strange beings approaching. He feared for his life, clenching his fists and rubbing his eyes, until he saw that they were the fearsome scorpion men, guardians of the mountains. They were gigantic and terrifying creatures of whom it was said, "Their heads touch the base of the heavens, their chests touch the hells. They give rise to great terror, and whoever beholds them dies." Gilgamesh was not overcome by fear. He bowed in respect before the gatekeeper. The scorpion man looked at the visitor and said to his companion, "Look at this man of a beautiful figure. He denotes great strength." "That man is 2/3 God and 1/3 man," she replied, noting his divine side. Face to face with Gilgamesh, the guardian asked, "Where did you come from to get here? What purpose brings you here after crossing stormy seas?" Gilgamesh answered, "I have undertaken this journey in search of Utnapishtim, he who among mortals attained immortality and won the favor of the gods. I wish to learn from him the mysteries of life and the threshold of death." The scorpion man was surprised that a mere mortal had come so far. He warned him that no one had ever traveled the path 12 leagues into the mountain, a place where eternal darkness reigned. But Gilgamesh was determined. No matter what the road may bring, be it bone-chilling cold or skin-scorching heat, adversity will not stop me. Please open the door. Seeing his bravery, the guardian agreed to let him pass, for he had reached the abode of the rising and setting sun unharmed. Gilgamesh obliged and stepped onto the narrow path. As he advanced, the darkness grew thicker and thicker, until he could see nothing at all. Despite his fear, Gilgamesh continued without stopping, guided by the force of his will. After traveling 9 leagues under the fury of a north wind, Gilgamesh felt the relief of twilight when he reached the 11th league. As he passed the 12th, he was bathed in sunlight, and before him stood a tree with red fruit, glittering like gems. As he rested, he heard a voice call out to him, Why do you wander from place to place without purpose? The life you seek you will never find. It was the god Shamash. Gilgamesh replied, after having sought my way in the starless plain, where my march seemed eternal, I longed to behold the sun and be flooded by its rays. Gilgamesh went on until he came upon a tavern. The landlady, seeing his ragged and deplorable appearance, was terrified and slammed the door in his face. Gilgamesh bowed his head and said to her, "Fear not, woman, I will not harm you." She came out cautiously and asked him what had him so exhausted as to wander alone in the bush. Gilgamesh sadly told her his story and the loss of his friend Enkidu, and that he was seeking Utnapishtim for immortality. The tavern keeper, Siduri, tried to make him desist. Do not wander without purpose. The gods decreed that men must die. Enjoy life and its small pleasures while you can. But Gilgamesh turned a deaf ear. He asked her to show him the way to Utnapishtim. The way is dangerous, and the waters of death have not been crossed by any still breathing. Only Urshanabi, the divine ferryman, can guide you, Siduri replied. Despite warnings that no one had ever successfully crossed those waters, Gilgamesh insisted that she take him to Urshanabi. He told his story to the boatman, who agreed to help him, and set sail for the island, instructing him not to touch the waters with his hands. After a long journey, Urshanabi spotted land in the distance and announced that they had finally arrived. From the shore, Utnapishtim watched in wonder, for never before had a mortal reached his abode. When Gilgamesh came into Utnapishtim's presence, he bowed respectfully and shared his story, marked by laughter and tears, of his adventures and losses. Utnapishtim welcomed him into his abode, a great ship that had withstood the great flood. Utnapishtim knew that for Gilgamesh to understand why the gods granted him immortality and admitted him to their council, he must first learn the details of the terrible flood that nearly wiped out mankind. I will reveal to you the great hidden secret, he said, and with a great sigh, he began his tale. Many years ago, the ancient city of Shuruppak on the banks of the Euphrates witnessed how the gods decided to unleash the flood. Anu, the father of them all, the brave Enlil their advisor, Ninurta, Enuj, and Ninijikyu Ea were present. E spoke to me in the name of the gods. Utnapishtim, tear down your hut, abandon your riches, for something great is going to happen. Build a great ship of enormous dimensions and a strong roof. In it shall fit all living beasts and seeds, for it will be a new beginning for mankind. Enlil is the author of the coming flood, and no one will be able to stop it. In fear, I replied, it will be an honor to obey your orders, but what shall I say to the city, to the people, to the elders? E replied, you will tell them that Enlil is your enemy, and you can no longer live in his territory. So you will leave for the deep waters to live with your Lord E. Without wasting any time, I started the construction of the ship. I notified my family, and in 5 days we erected the 1-acre base structure and 10 dozen cubits in height and length on the deck. On the 7th day, the ship was ready, and I began to gather animals, food, plants, seeds, and supplies as Ea indicated. All that remained was to wait for the divine sign of the deluge. Shamash appeared to me and warned me of the coming of the great storm. When the night god appears and the first drops fall, get into the ship and close all the doors. The signal came with a huge black cloud approaching. I ordered Puzur Amuri, the boatman, to take command and close tight. For 6 days and nights, the flood wind and southern storms swept over the land. On the 7th day, it began to give way. I peered down a hatch and, oh wonder, I saw only water everywhere and mankind turned to mud. In every region, a mountain emerged and my ship ran aground on Nizar without my being able to move it. I first released a dove, but it returned when it could not find a place to perch. So did a swallow. But when I sent out a crow, it did not return. It continued its flight until it was out of sight. I understood then that it was time to disembark. I took everything out and offered a sacrifice on the top of the mountain with 7 lit fires. Enlil complained to the other gods for having helped me, for his plan was that every living thing should perish. But they brought him to his senses. Enlil came looking for me to compensate me for my perseverance. He entered my ship, made my wife and me kneel, and said, "Until now, Utnapishtim, you have only been human, but from now on you shall be as gods." He took our hands, placed his on our foreheads, and granted us immortality. "This is how things happened," concluded Utnapishtim, "by my sacrifice during the flood. The gods blessed me." Gilgamesh looked at him longingly. "Then help me too, to attain immortality. Intercede with the gods to grant it to me." However, Utnapishtim, knowing the dangers and challenges involved in such a quest, imposed a stern test on him. "Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. If you succeed in conquering sleep," Utnapishtim told him, "I will summon the gods to grant you the immortality you crave." Gilgamesh, determined, accepted the challenge without hesitation. He sat down next to Utnapishtim, ready to fight against the fatigue and drowsiness that threatened to overwhelm him. The hours passed slowly and heavily, and sleep struggled to take hold of Gilgamesh. His eyelids closed heavily, and his body longed to surrender to rest. However, the image of Enkidu, his faithful friend snatched away by death, urged him on. Again, he settled into a corner and stared into the distance, willing himself not to even blink. Hardly a few hours had passed, however, when a deep and irresistible sleep enveloped him like a whirlpool, causing him to collapse hopelessly. Utnapishtim, watching him succumb, could not help but have a disappointed expression. "Look at the strong man who desires immortality," he said to his wife. "Sleep, like a furious wind, has enveloped him." Utnapishtim's wife, moved by Gilgamesh's boldness and the hard road he had traveled, interceded for him. "Wake up the poor boy," she said to her husband. "He has traveled so far and overcome so many trials. It would be only fair to give him a chance." Utnapishtim, moved by his wife's words and Gilgamesh's tenacity, approached the king of Uruk and woke him with a gentle shake. Gilgamesh, startled, rose confused and embarrassed. "I have failed," he muttered in disappointment. "I have succumbed to sleep and have not been worthy of immortality." The immortal looked at him sternly. "You have failed, and therefore I cannot help you achieve the immortality you seek. You had better return safely to Uruk with Urshanabi." Gilgamesh lamented bitterly and pleaded in tears. "No, for pity's sake. I have come such a long and bloody way. Do not deny me this opportunity." But Utnapishtim remained adamant. His wife moved and intervened. "Have mercy on this poor man. He has emerged victorious from tremendous trials to get this far. He deserves compensation for his bravery." Utnapishtim exhaled a deep sigh and called to Gilgamesh, who was already crestfallen on his way to the boat. "Listen, brave king of Uruk. I cannot give you the immortality you crave, but I will reveal to you a secret that will grant you many more years of life and youth." Gilgamesh knelt, filled with renewed hope and gratitude. "Speak, divine being. I will do anything you ask of me." The immortal explained to him that in the depths of the sea grew a magical plant with rejuvenating properties. Whoever ingested it would shed his old skin like a snake and regain new vitality. Without thinking twice, Gilgamesh stripped off his clothes, tied a rock to his feet, and dived to the bottom. After an agonizing search, he spotted a thorny lily-like plant and plucked it up before rising to the surface. He was breathing heavily, but his eyes were alighting with happiness. Once in the boat, he told Urshanabi to set sail for Uruk, where he would finally taste the magical plant, and where all his subjects would participate in its rejuvenating power. On the way, they spotted a spring of crystalline waters and decided to stop to rest and refresh themselves. Gilgamesh stripped off his clothes and entered the calm waters, leaving the precious plant on the shore. But he didn't count on the fact that its particular scent had attracted a wily rock snake. As Gilgamesh splashed about obliviously, the reptile crept up stealthily, and completely engulfed the magical plant before the king's astonished gaze. Gilgamesh let out a shriek of horror and fury. The snake eventually shed its old wrinkled skin, leaving it behind as its new, young, glistening skin completely covered it before crawling away. Gilgamesh's dream of eternal youth had vanished before his very eyes. Shattered, he dropped to his knees on the shore, cursing his fate. He would never overcome the relentless passage of time. Gilgamesh's soul hung in the balance after witnessing the serpent devour the plant that was his last hope of eternal youth. He remained kneeling on the shore for a long time, with his eyes lost in the distance and a lump in his throat that prevented him from articulating words. Urshanabi, his faithful boatman, waited respectfully until the dejected king gathered the strength to sit up and walk to the boat with his shoulders slumped. During the long voyage back to Uruk, Gilgamesh remained taciturn, hardly taking a bite to eat, his countenance unhinged with disappointment. In his mind, he kept repeating the last words of Utnapishtim, the wise man he had struggled so hard to find. "I cannot give you the immortality you crave, but I will reveal to you a secret that will grant you many more years of life and renewed youth." What a cruel mockery of fate! After risking his life on a journey fraught with unimaginable dangers in pursuit of a chimera, the magic plant that would restore his freshness had slipped through his fingers like water. Again and again, he reproached himself for his carelessness in having let it slip away from him at that spring. In these black thoughts, he tossed and turned again and again, oblivious to the passage of time and the miles that took them away from the island of Utnapishtim. Urshanabi respected his silence, knowing that pain needs silence to be processed. When finally, the walls of the city of Uruk came into view on the horizon, something stirred in Gilgamesh's chest. Whether it was shame, relief, or the sad acceptance of his fate, he could not say. What is certain is that the reunion with his people stirred up old emotions he had thought buried. A crowd gathered at the docks to greet them, full of cheers and shouts of joy at seeing their king return alive. Gilgamesh descended from the boat with an uncertain step, overwhelmed by the effusiveness of his subjects who did not cease to praise him. He looked around at the people he had ruled with firmness for so many years, and the faces seemed to him older, more wrinkled than when he had seen them for the last time. And at that moment, he became fully aware that time would never stop for him, that his old age would advance unappealable until the final sunset. "I will never succeed in defeating the relentless passage of time," he thought. At least, he told himself, he would have to live it with fortitude and leave a glorious legacy as king of Uruk, even if immortality was denied him. With his head held high, Gilgamesh walked to meet his people, who cheered him once again, oblivious to the bitter thoughts of their lord. The quest for eternal youth was over, but another one was beginning. The acceptance of human limits and the wisdom to transcend them. This video has been created for Myth Comics. Thank you for joining us in this adventure of ancient wisdom. See you the next time.